Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Ending the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this May 15, 2014 edition of Nightcast. In our opening story tonight, a Sudanese court sentences a woman to hang for, get this, apostasy.
This case has touched a raw nerve in Sudan. According to Amnesty International, Dr. Mariam Yahya Ibrahim, who is 8 months pregnant, was raised as a Christian. But the authorities consider her to be a Muslim. That's because that was the faith of her father. As a result, the court has given her 3 days to recant her Christianity and revert to Islam or be hanged. She was also convicted of adultery on the grounds that her marriage to a Christian man from South Sudan was void under Sudan's version of Islamic law, which says Muslim women cannot marry non-Muslims. Her lawyers are determined to appeal this verdict.
There are legal restrictions that prevent the punishment because she is pregnant. According to the law, no punishment is allowed until she gives birth and breastfeed for 2 years. Our strategy will be to challenge the verdict at the Appeal Court, the Supreme Court, and the Constitutional Court. We had several similar cases, but they were slightly different. The only similar case was that of martyr Mahmoud Muhammad Taha, who did not convert from Islam. His trial was basically a political one. Apart from that, there were those who claimed they were God or something, but no punishment was ever put in place.
Protesters gathered outside the court in Khartoum, both her supporters and those who back the punishment. Mary has a right to be a Christian, says the poster on the left here, and I have the right to choose any religion, says the one to the right.
The problem is that the ruling was a swift one, a death sentence taken so quickly.
This is a new and dangerous phenomenon. In my opinion, this is a kind of missionary. This is the first of a series to prompt apostasy.
There is a long-running debate in Islam whether apostasy is a crime. While death sentences are rarely carried out in Sudan, this case has attracted international concern and calls for the immediate release of Dr. Mariam Yahya Ibrahim. Alex Jacana, BBC News.
Thank you, Alex. And apostasy, interesting, friends. A lot of us who, some of you who watch this program can well relate to that term, having experienced it within a congregation many of us were a part of, or together as one big body for a long time. We're actually still one body, but we're a body now very much scattered and fractionalized in many ways. But thank be to God, he says he's going to gather us all back together, and he's going to fly us to a place he's prepared in the wilderness for nourishment, protection, final training, safety for 3.5 years. While, let's go ahead and throw our slide up on the screen with the 6 seals from the book of Revelation, chapter 6. During the 5th seal, the Great Tribulation, a people who are accounted worthy to escape will be taken to a place, let's just go ahead and call it a place of safety, a place of protection, nourishment, final training, a time when many of the body of Christ will become martyrs, those who are left behind. And they're still a part of the true church of God. It's just that they have a very special role to play out, to become the end-time martyrs. They will, those who endure it all the way through it, will be at the marriage supper with Jesus Christ along with all other saints who are part of the elect, the first resurrection when Christ returns. This fifth seal will also be a time of World War III, a time of the revived Holy Roman Empire with a new emperor being crowned by the Pope in a coronation ceremony, as we mentioned last night, in the Emperor's Hall in Frankfurt, Germany. And a hall where many heads of the Holy Roman Empire, many emperors of the Roman Empire were coronated, many by the Pope as part of the Holy Roman Empire, in that hall, that Emperor's Hall in Frankfurt. It was bombed in the latter part of World War II, but thanks to the Marshall Plan and the generous funding through the Marshall Plan of people of the United States, that Emperor's Hall, where the next head of and final head, the seventh head of the Holy Roman Empire will be coronated, that hall was rebuilt courtesy of the taxpayers and the people of the United States of America. Way to go, United States. You just funded the hall in which the beast will be coronated. Not just funded, it was funded shortly after World War II, rebuilt soon after World War II was over. But while we've got that slide still behind me on the screen, friends, the fourth seal, we've got a couple of stories related to the fourth seal next for you. High winds and dry, that fourth seal, by the way, being the pale horse as depicted in Revelation, with a rider whose name is Death, alongside whom Hades, hell, the grave, rides. And Jesus Christ described the attributes, the characteristics, the conditions, the events and situations of this horse. One of the terms he described these activities of this horse with was loimos, which in a good Greek English lexicon you can see it means pestilence, the plagues of Egypt, disease epidemics. It also means seismos, seismic conditions, seismic activity, commotions in the air, commotions on the ground, such as the kind of things we have in this next story, where high winds and dry conditions spawned a dramatic firenado in Southern California. You know, you've heard of tornadoes and you've heard of wildfires. Put the two together and you've got firenado. And there's one occurring in Southern California now as emergency crews struggle to contain as many as 10 brush fires in the area. Several wildfires have raged across parts of San Diego County, forcing thousands of people to flee their homes. As you'll hear in this video, months of drought have made the region particularly prone to fires this year. The combination of fire and ground-level winds can lead to what I just described to you as firenadoes, which can propel hot embers for miles. And friends, we actually have no commentary or no audio even with this video. Let me just bring it forward for you while that plays. And I'll just remind you briefly again that several wildfires have raged across parts of San Diego County, forcing thousands of people to flee their homes. Again, this is being caused by months of drought in California. And you know, even in the United States, we're in the worst drought since 1956, now being called the worst drought in the history of the United States. Friends, I hope you're getting these extremely dramatic points being made in the news in the past few months. We're in the most extreme drought in the United States ever, ever, ever. We have disease epidemics breaking out that are taking off like wildfires and that are destined, as the man in the video last night said, it's going to get worse. Some of these are going to become the worst ever. You know, we're in a time very much when we can expect to see things wrap up even overnight. As Mr. Herbert Armstrong used to describe it, it's like a mousetrap that once it's set, the bait's there, it's trigger ready to go. Pow! So hope you're ready, because, we aren't the ones who take the bait, but we watch the bait be set, and then we got to be ready. Once United Europe bites the bait and puts a beast in power, pow, too late. You'd better be on board the flight that takes you to the place of nourishment, protection, final training, safety for 3.5 years, because if you're not on that, you're left behind for what's called the time of Jacob's trouble, a time so bad that no time before it, as Jesus Christ described it, has ever been as bad, and no time again ever after it will ever again be as bad, thankfully, as the time of Jacob's trouble during that fifth seal, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over, labeled as the Great Tribulation. Again, a time of the martyrdom of God's saints, those who keep the Sabbath, those who refuse to work on the Sabbath, those who refuse to bow down and worship the image of the beast. Now we've got another story related to this wildfire in California situation. Thousands of people have fled their homes in Southern California to avoid an aggressive wildfire that has destroyed several houses so far in the city of Carlsbad near San Diego. Firefighters are struggling to contain the fires in hot, dry, and windy conditions. David Willis reports from Los Angeles.
This is not an image you'd normally associate with a country that has one of the most abundant water supplies in the world. But rainy season this year didn't deliver, and Sao Paulo's biggest reservoir is feeling the effects.
Friends, let me come out and explain just for a moment. I guess we lost the second video we had on the Los Angeles wildfires, but I think you got a good taste of it from the video you could see in the as it played in the first one there. You know what? Actually, let's come back to the one I was starting up to play. I think I have it, so we can play that for you. Nope, actually, yeah, we do. Right here. Here's David Willis.
This was the scene in the Californian coastal city of Carlsbad. Flames whipped up by offshore winds engulfed several homes, prompting fire officials to call for the evacuation of thousands of homeowners. This fire has already destroyed hundreds of acres of land. Yet despite fighting it from the air as well as the ground, fire crews have yet to get a handle on it. Other blazes have broken out across the region, fueled by winds gusting off the Pacific Ocean. Several buildings on the Camp Pendleton Marine Base were evacuated, along with a naval weapons station. The cause of these fires isn't known, but a sudden heat wave combined with tinder-dry conditions following a long drought here has left parts of the region highly combustible. California has seen more than 1,300 fires already this year, and the driest months are still to come. David Willis, BBC News, Los Angeles.
All right, thank you. We're glad to have that report on an extremely serious wildfire in Southern California, San Diego area, Carlsbad. All right, now, friends, the next video, we go overseas to Sao Paulo in Brazil, near Brazil, in South America. I believe my friend Mr. Graham, will be interested in this one. The rainy season this year didn't deliver. A drought is currently plaguing Brazil's biggest city. The main reservoir serving Sao Paulo is at its lowest level on record, just weeks before the city hosts the opening match of the World Cup. Experts are warning that unless the next rainy season delivers twice as much rain as normal, And friends, you know, there's one thing where Jesus Christ told us to be watching world news, and he told us to pray about world news. Let me review that with you very quickly. If you want to turn with me, it's in the 21st chapter of Luke and verse 36. Or you can just listen along as I read it. Luke 21, verse 36, Jesus Christ speaking, he says, "Watch you, therefore, and don't just watch," he says, "and pray." Become an active part of what you watch and see in world events. By doing what? By praying about those events you see. Yes, now he also meant watch yourself and be sure you are conducting yourself as a Christian, meaning one who obeys his Father and who keeps all of God's commands and statutes as Christ did. And it also means very specifically to watch therefore. And the therefore follows in Luke 21 what Jesus Christ was explaining to his disciples when they asked him what would be the sign of your return and of the end of this age. And Jesus Christ described the events that are also that the events that relate to the seals of Revelation, that relate to the first seal, the second seal, the third seal, and the fourth seal. Those things Jesus Christ was describing in answer to his disciples. Also the fifth seal. But these first four seals have been happening big time of late, and the next major event in prophecy to happen is that fifth seal, the Great Tribulation. Hasn't happened yet. We had a type of it when there was a martyrdom that Fox's Book of Martyrs writes about. But that was just a tiny little foretaste compared to the big martyrdom that's coming during the time of Jacob's trouble. The time of trouble so bad none before it's ever been so bad. The time after it that will never again be as bad as what will be during Jacob's trouble. And the time of a huge martyrdom of God's saints. Yet to come, very shortly now in the future. Very shortly now in the future. We're closer to it than we ever have been. Chronologically, that statement just flat plain works. You know, and Christ said, watch these world events that relate to these seals of Revelation. Watch them and be an active part of them by praying about them. Now, how can you be an active part of them related to this story we're about to play in video, related to the rain problems and drought problems they're having in Brazil and Sao Paulo, the biggest city in Brazil? You can do so by asking God, look, God, this big event in Brazil is coming up, that the World Cup, would you give these people a break and bring some rain there? Now, if you'd like to see that, you could move God, and then we could see some rain come there. Now, maybe there's no reason to pray that. Maybe you'd rather say, God, thy kingdom come, get this whole thing over with. Move it along, you know, and let that seal that represents disease epidemics and famines, the black horse representing famine, which comes as a result of droughts and so on. And food can't grow, and so there's a lack of food, shortage of food products, and so there's famine. People won't be able to eat. So you could even be praying, thy kingdom come. I want to see your kingdom come, and you could see these things speed up. Or you could pray, hey, God, I got a buddy that's going to be in that World Cup. I want you to bring some rain over there. I'm just explaining to you that when God says, watch you therefore and pray that always, he's saying pray about these events. Be an active part of the world events through prayer. And then you become a part of what happens in the world, and you become very meaningful to God. He sees your heart. Do you really care about your fellow man on the earth the way Jesus Christ cared and does care about them? Now, yes, he'll let them go through this famine and the pestilence to let man learn a lesson, because God could turn all that around if men would repent, but the lesson is men will not repent, and the record in world history is written that man wouldn't repent, and also written that man without God cannot govern himself. He will bring events to where man would have annihilated all mankind except for the fact that Jesus Christ says he will intervene. All flesh would be wiped out except for the elect's sake. Christ intervene at the last moment. And the rest of what he says in verse 36 of Luke 21 is, watch you therefore and pray always. There's a promise to this. If you do that, that you may be accounted worthy to escape the worst time in world history, the time of Jacob's trouble, the time of that fifth seal of great tribulation, the martyrdom of saints like you've never seen before. You can escape it, my dear friends, by watching and praying and obeying God. Now, in this story in Sao Paulo, let's get to it. Experts are warning that unless the next rainy season delivers twice as much rain as normal, the problems will just get worse. The BBC's Cathy Wilson reports from Sao Paulo's main reservoir and talks to the president of the World Water Council, Bernardino Braga, and car wash owner Anderson Borges dos Santos, who is already having to cope with continuing disruptions to his car wash business.
This is not an image you'd normally associate with a country that has one of the most abundant water supplies in the world. But rainy season this year didn't deliver, and Sao Paulo's biggest reservoir is feeling the effects.
This reservoir supplies about half of Greater Sao Paulo's 20 million people with water. On a good year, I wouldn't be able to walk where I'm walking now because it would be covered in water. But as you can see, the levels are really low. In fact, water levels are at their lowest since records began.
There's still water, but not much. Levels have fallen to below 10% of the reservoir's capacity. The state utility is planning on pumping reserves below the pipes that connect this reservoir with its customers. But beyond that, options are fast running out.
We have to start a campaign of using water parsimoniously, using water with care. We have to increase awareness of the public in general and of the public authorities, the politicians, that they have to invest more in having more resilient systems.
In Anderson's neighbourhood in Sao Paulo's suburbs, water supply is cut every other day. It doesn't make it easy running a car wash business at the moment.
It's not raining, and when it does rain, it doesn't rain in the reservoir. It rains in other places. So people are worried that shortages will get worse.
That wouldn't be good for Anderson's business, nor for Brazil as it gets ready to host the World Cup. But Anderson is taking a pragmatic approach. Waterless car washes are the way of the future. He just has to convince his clients of that too. Katie Watson, BBC News, Sao Paulo.
Thank you, Katie. And friends, of course, we are watching events that could lead to famine, especially these seismic conditions of big drought that, again, could lead to famine. The third seal, the black horse of famine, and the fourth seal, which includes drought. It's not only just loimos, disease epidemics and pestilence and plagues. It also, Jesus Christ described this seal as loimos, seismic conditions such as anything that affects the air or the ground. And drought seismically affects the ground. Things won't grow in it. And also tarake, trouble, not the big mega trouble of the fifth seal, but trouble. That's all part of that pale horse, the fourth seal. And the drought part of it, it works hand in glove with famine. It can cause the famine because things don't grow. Now, we're also, friends, watching things that relate to the beast power coming together, things that relate to the EU and all of that pulling together. Tonight, there's a big TV debate. 5 rivals for the EU's top job have argued over the economic crisis, immigration, and other key issues for the 28-nation bloc in a live TV debate.
Scroll back over the past 5 years and you can see why Europe is proving a tough sell. The riots, the Eurozone bailouts, unemployment lines, still in some countries 25% are out of work, Germany and the policy of austerity, and for many the hard times are not over. Today in France there were protests against a public sector wage freeze, and there was sobering news that the Eurozone economy is scarcely growing, with stagnation in France. So this was the backdrop to one of the main events of the European elections. A TV debate tonight involving candidates for Europe's top job, President of the European Commission. The idea is that the candidate of the largest group in the European Parliament should get the prize of leading the EU. But heads of government will also make their choice. None of these politicians are well known, but their vision for Europe might matter.
We live in a European Union where 6 million young men and women are unemployed. They are paying with their life chances and their future for crises other people have caused.
We cannot have a European Union where all of a generation is being lost and where people lose their faith and their perspective in a better life in future.
And then the candidates were asked about the growth of Euro-scepticism and the Euro crisis.
First, it should be a disaster for all the economies in Europe. For all the economies, and in the north and in the south, if we go back to national currencies.
And candidates found themselves having to defend their actions in the Eurozone crisis.
Over years, I worked day and night and more nights than days to keep Greece in the euro.
If the UK ends up trying to renegotiate its membership of the EU, then the person chosen to become President of the European Commission is of huge significance. The candidates here say they remain ready to negotiate with Britain, and they say they are open to more being done at a national rather than a European level. The government in the UK, however, will be wary. Almost all these candidates want closer union, more integration. The battle for Europe's top job may prove to be long and divisive. Gavin Hewitt, BBC News, Brussels.
Thank you, Gavin Hewitt, for a very interesting report. And friends, we've got more related to this, with some countries experiencing high unemployment and concerns about migration and the cost of being part of the EU. Many places are experiencing skepticism about being part of the Union. The European elections could therefore produce a parliament with more opponents to the EU than ever before. Chris Morris and Matthew Price have visited Greece and Denmark to assess the public mood in each country ahead of the vote.
Buffeted by the strongest economic winds in the Eurozone crisis, and Greece is still suffering. It's fertile ground for the poster boy of the European left, Alexis Tsipras, and his anti-austerity campaign.
Things are getting worse by the minute. We have hospitals without beds for the sick. We have schools without books and teachers.
And while the government says a corner has been turned, there will be a huge anti-establishment vote from the hard left to the extreme right.
It's hardly surprising given the level of economic pain they've lived through over the last few years. But right across Europe in this election season, there's a political malaise. What about where you are, Matt? I guess to some extent it's a case of being forearmed is forewarned.
Well, Chris, here in Denmark, people are pretty fed up with their government, and that's leading to a massive swell in support for this lot. And you don't need to speak Danish to understand their message. Meet the Danish People's Party. They believe EU rules are eroding traditional Danish values. They could win the most votes here. Their message seems to resonate.
I think that's good we are a member of this union, but I really think that's too much.
I like it. I'm a fan. Well, there are some problems.
Does it really have to be so much integration?
Denmark flies the oldest flag in the world. It is a proud, small country. At the national public broadcaster, their correspondent believes attitudes to the EU are changing.
There is nobody who wants to leave the European Union. But from time to time, you see people who would like the European Union to leave us a bit alone.
Many Danes seem pretty well informed about the European Union. They believe that it brings economic benefits to their country. And yet there is an increasing concern here about the costs of EU membership. And a growing number want this reformed.
Okay, friends, we're going to go over just a little bit tonight. This is Thursday night. We don't do a report on Friday night or Saturday night. Our next nightcast news report will be Sunday evening. And there's a lot of extremely important news tonight. We won't go a full hour. We probably won't even go 45 minutes. But I want to get in a few more stories that are important to realize some of the events and things happening around the world. This next one is from Los Angeles, where an oil pipe in Los Angeles has broken. Oh, I wanted to mention something to you first. That last story about Denmark related to the EU. Denmark, as you can see in this slide, if you count 10 down, you see Denmark is the son of Jacob named Dan, who was the fifth-born son of Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. And he was the firstborn son of Bilhah, the handmaid of Rachel. And Dan is now in Denmark and in Ireland, as described in Genesis 49:17 and Judges 18, verses 12 and 29. Dan has the characteristic of being perfidious. I think that's a pretty good description of our brother Dan, our Irish friends, and our other Danish friends. And I hope you got the point in that last video. I hope you heard that point, that Denmark is considered to be one of the oldest, of the Israelite tribe cities throughout the world. One of the oldest cities there in that part of the world in Europe. Just an interesting point to note there. We'll keep that in mind for stories and events we see in future things. But now this next story, we're going to, as I was telling you about the 50,000 gallons of oil that have spilled in Los Angeles. That'd be 190,000 liters, just to give you another idea of it, especially for those of you in Europe. This video footage let's go ahead and roll that because there's no commentary with it, just video. This footage shows crude flowing across roads and pavements. And you see this big gob of oil as firefighters struggle to minimize the damage. Again, this is in Los Angeles, California. And friends, there's a lot of things going on. God has removed a lot of the protection he used to give us in the United States. And why is that, friends? Well, that relates to a verse that you can find in one of the two blessing and cursing chapters, one of them being in Leviticus 26, the other one being in Deuteronomy 28. And in Leviticus 26, we see, just briefly there, God promises through the first half of the chapter, Leviticus 26, the first half of Deuteronomy 28, he does the same thing. Through the first half, he promises many different kinds of blessings to both individuals and, severally, and to individuals collectively as a nation, if the majority of those individuals are obeying God. You'll be the head, not the tail. You'll be the lender, not the borrower. One of you will chase 100, put 100 to flight, and many things like that. On the other hand, if you disobey me, God says, it'll be just the reverse. You'll be the borrower, not the lender. You'll be the tail, not the head. One of them will chase 100 of you and put you to shame, and even more so where with countries that God has greatly blessed, like the United States, he's really specifically applying what you see in verse 26, or verse 19 of Leviticus 26, where God says, if you will, and verse 14 says, if you will not hearken unto me and will not do all these commandments, then, verse 19 of Leviticus 26, I will break the pride of your power, and I'll make your heaven as iron and your earth as brass. You'll have a hard time. Instead of being the hot shot, you'll be the drudge. And instead of having the pride and the power that used to be mentioned, that the United States was coming after you about that. Ooh, well, people clean up their act real fast. Anymore, they burn the flag and spit all over you. Say, hey, it doesn't mean a thing. That nation, it's got all that power. It can't do anything with it. Won't do anything with it. Its willpower, it's broken. Its morals have become a stench in God's nostrils because they don't keep God's law. They have no morals. The rest of the world can see that. Well, friends, in another part of the world, there are several other parts. There's a lot of things going on that would relate to your second seal of Revelation, the red horse that Jesus Christ described in plain language in Matthew 24, Luke 21, Mark 13. He described the attributes of this red horse as war and rumors of war and world war, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. We're in between round 2, round 3 of one big world war that began during the last century, with round 1, had a recess from about 1914 or so till 1938-39, when round 2 started up and came to a recess in 1945, and we've had a long recess, and now we're waiting for round 3. And during that wait, as Jesus Christ described, we're seeing more and more activity of these first 4 seals, including that second seal, the red horse, that Jesus Christ described as war and rumors of war, and that includes civil war, internal war within a country. We're having a lot of protest and that kind of thing. Here's a couple of examples. This first one in this video shows anti-government protest in Haiti turning violent.
Hundreds of protesters take to the streets of Port-au-Prince. Angry with the government of President Michel Martelly, they are calling for his resignation. The demonstrators marched to the National Palace, where Martelly was commemorating the 3rd anniversary of his presidency with supporters.
The Martelly government will celebrate 3 years of corruption. He keeps the population hostage in misery.
They were turned away by security, who fired tear gas on them. Local media reports that 1 person was injured. Protesters accuse the president and his government of corruption and of not doing enough to rebuild the country after the 2010 earthquake. The UN estimates that more than 145,000 Haitians still live in makeshift camps. Mr. Martelly condemned the violence. He's previously denied corruption allegations and has said his government is addressing Haiti's economic and political problems. Carolina Velandia, BBC News.
Thank you, Carolina. And friends, elsewhere in the world, a deadly attack on Thai protest on the Thai protest camp in Bangkok is in our next news story. 3 anti-government protesters have been killed and more than 20 others injured in an attack in the Thai capital Bangkok, police there say. Witnesses reported explosions and gunfire at a protest camp at the city's Democracy Monument. Protesters have been pressing the Senate to replace the cabinet with an appointed administration. It comes after former Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra was removed by a Thai court last week. Jonathan Head reports.
This was the scene shortly after the attack. There are plenty of soldiers posted near this, the main protest camp. But they could not prevent what appears to have been a bold operation using grenades and gunfire that lasted several minutes. 2 men were killed and many more injured. They had been sleeping here, in the monument that commemorates the founding of Thai democracy, a democracy that's now in danger of crumbling. The protest movement moved its camp here last week to put pressure on the Senate to overthrow the government and replace it with an appointed administration. The resignation of the Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra has encouraged it to believe it might succeed. Its guards now control access to the Prime Minister's official office. But this morning's attack shows they are still vulnerable, and that if they do force the government from power, there is likely to be a strong, possibly violent reaction. Jonathan Head, BBC News, Bangkok.
And friends, in the last story that I wanted you to be sure and see tonight, related again to this red horse of activity of internal strife and civil war within various countries. 3 unions in Turkey, and Turkey being the nephew. I said that backwards. We are the nephew of Turkey. Turkey being the uncle of, or our great uncle or uncle of the people of the United States and the UK. Why do I say that? Because Turkey, in biblical understanding, is the descendant of Edom, Esau. Esau was a brother of Jacob. Jacob's name was changed to Israel. Israel had 12 sons, as we showed you in the slide earlier. One of those sons was Joseph, who had 2 sons named Ephraim and Manasseh. Today, the UK are the modern descendants of Ephraim, and the United States are the modern descendants of Manasseh. They carry the name of Joseph. Joseph was a son of Jacob, who was the brother of Esau. That makes Joseph the nephew of Esau. Esau being the modern-day nation of Turkey, that makes Turkey, Uncle Turkey, nephew United States, nephew UK. So our uncle Esau is having this huge tension and protest over there because trade unions in Turkey are holding a one-day strike in protest at the country's worst mine disaster, a mine disaster that claimed at least 282 lives. Excavators are digging mass graves, and loudspeakers are broadcasting the names of the dead in the town at the center of the disaster. Orla Gurin reports from Soma.
At the cemetery in Soma, the coffins kept coming to an area they call the Martyrs' Plot. Miners who worked together and died together were laid to rest side by side. Relatives consumed by grief. They wept for victims of what some are calling industrial homicide. Senam lost her nephew, Ur. He was 26 and had just become a father. The mine is dangerous, she says. But there are no other jobs in Soma. Of course, we are angry with the people at the top. Well, the graves are being filled here one by one. This community is saying goodbye to husbands, fathers and sons. For some, the grief is compounded by anger, by a belief that all of this could have been avoided by better safety standards at the mine. And at the scene, the struggle to recover the victims has continued, slowly. Rescuers say they have been hampered by hellish conditions below ground.
Imagine a pitch-black tunnel. There is water, mixed with coal dust, coming up to your knees. It feels like wet cement. We've built bridges in there, so we won't have to walk in it. And the dead won't fall into that mix when we carry them out.
This man survived all that, but lost 30 friends. Junaid Suai helped to save 3 of his fellow miners and tried to save more. I went home to see my kids after I got out, he told us, but then I went back to the mine to help my friends. I can't feel happy that I'm alive because hundreds are dead. The huge loss of life has sparked anti-government protests, which have spread to several major cities and towns. This was Izmir, 2 hours from Soma. Police were out in force, but the anger here will be hard to quench. It was on full view during the Prime Minister's visit yesterday. Recep Tayyip Erdogan had to be hustled into a supermarket for refuge. In the chaos inside, he appears to slap the man in the blue T-shirt. His office told us whatever happened, it was a reaction of the moment. And then there's this. The Prime Minister's aide caught on camera kicking a protester in the town. Critics say the government is, once again, showing contempt. Back at the cemetery, they prayed for the victims. Many are demanding justice for the dead. This human tragedy is becoming a political crisis.
Friends, good to keep aware of Uncle Erdogan, Uncle Turkey, who's often been very helpful to the United States. He's allowed us to have bases, allowed the United States to have bases within Turkey that have been very helpful to the purposes of NATO and the United States' interest, at least the long interest of the past. And things are changing, though, dramatically. And as we see a changing Turkey, we will probably see some changes in the relationship between Uncle Turkey and Uncle Erdogan and what they do or don't do any longer for the United States or the UK, Ephraim, Manasseh. Friends, we went a little longer tonight. There were a lot of stories related to the events from today that we should be aware of in order to do as Jesus Christ instructed us to do in Luke 21, verse 36, to be watching world events, those events that relate to the seals of Revelation, and to be praying about them so that we are an active part of these events leading to the fifth seal, the Great Tribulation, leading to the heavenly signs, leading to the sealing of 144,000, and leading to, where's our larger slide? Let's take a moment and put a larger slide on the screen. What happened to that large slide? Well, I think if I go to a different layer, we can find this one that expands this out. This will show you the 144,000 part of it. And then this one will show you the one that includes the seventh seal from the book of Revelation that relates to events leading up to Jesus Christ's return, something that we are very much looking forward to. All right, that's all we have for you for this Thursday night's report. Friends, we'll be back Sunday with the next regular edition of Nightcast, God willing, and the creek don't rise. And we'll also be back on the weekend on a different channel for those of you who follow us on the sabbathservice.tv channel, a part of cogtv.org. You can see the times for our weekend broadcasting. If you want to be part of that or tune into that, you can go to the homepage of cogtv.org and you can see the times listed for our weekend programming. Otherwise, for those of you who are regular watchers of Nightcast and want to rejoin us again, God willing, Creek Don't Rise, we'll be back Sunday night with our next edition of the day's current news related to the Bible and prophecy here on Nightcast. Thank you for joining me tonight. Until next time, dear friends, this is Stephen Lloyd saying, "So long, friends."
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on COGTV.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the COGTV.org video archive.